what we're going to talk about is just a very brief session really about communication differences in autism. And for the last week, what we looked at was them expressive difficulties that some of our children and young people have. So expression is around you know, the words that we use, the sounds that we use, our non-verbal body gestures or cues that we might engage with. Our behaviour as well is a big form of communication, remember, particularly for a lot of our children and young people. So this week what we're really going to look at is that receptive understanding. So when you see words like receptive or comprehension on reports, what that means is it's that understanding. So the ability to understand sounds, words, gestures, and all-round levels of communication really. So we know that for a lot of our children and young people, it's something they find particularly difficult. And in the early years, this kind of receptive understanding starts developing really, really early on. The children might, you know, little babies will look at you and they'll give you eye contact and they'll kind of engage in that kind of repetitive kind of language babble that happens. They might turn their head to look at you. They might watch your face and watch your facial features and your facial gestures, and all that's happening there is something really amazing. We're looking at kind of developing that receptive understanding about people and the world around us. Okay, so we know it starts obviously very, very early on in life, from the moment we're born, and we know that it can affect a lot of our children and young people. And if we have receptive differences, it will have an impact on things like you know, how they interact at school, things like making friends, things like basic ability to communicate their needs and understand other people around them. So it's really important that we understand our children's communication and we know what to do to maybe support that. Okay, so some of the things I just wanted. Hi Noreen, thanks for joining us. Hi Nick. Yes, I hope I feel better soon too. I've had this cough for 2 weeks now. So some of the things that we need to really think about is when we think about receptive understanding is to be able to understand somebody. There's some certain key skills that we need to have. So we need to basically have, at a very simple level, the ability to listen. So we need to be able to actually attend to something and be able to listen to what somebody's saying or to what somebody's communicating through the non-verbal body cues and through the eye contact and the facial expressions. And that is a massive skill within itself. And we know for some of our children, young people, at that point they have a real difficulty. Actually getting your child's attention can be really, really problematic for some of our families. Okay, you also, to be able to understand something, you need to be able to filter out a lot of that other stuff around you. So, you know, you're probably sitting in your homes now or walking the dog or whatever you're doing, and you're still able to focus on my voice probably and ignore some of the other internal incoming stimulus that's actually happening. Again, that is a really important skill that some of our children, young people and adults find particularly difficult. You need to be able to discriminate sounds as well, because if you can't discriminate sounds, you're not going to be able to understand the patterns that actually occur, you know, when words are put together. So at a very simple level, you know, we may be asking children to go and put their shoes on, but do they actually understand what a shoe is, and can they relate that item to actually the language that we're speaking? Okay. We also need to have kind of memory, so we need to be able to remember what's being said, to be able to do something with that information, and then we need to retain it, so we need to save it for later. So you know, there's some people with autism that I've worked with in the past who says when they're given a word, they almost have a directory in their head. It's like a filing cabinet of different words. So, you know, you might say car, and they then go through their filing cabinet and they've got thousands of different cars in the filing cabinet, and they've got to work really hard to pick out the right one to actually be able to make sense of the situation around them. Okay, so lots of differences or difficulties around receptive communication, and sometimes in the world that we live, we talk a lot. If anyone's noticed, I like to talk, although not today with my sore throat, but we speak a lot of words that sometimes don't necessarily make sense and we don't really need to say. For many of our children and young people, that can be absolutely so overwhelming and it can be too much for them. So if there's all that information coming in, they might just shut down and not really engage with what you're actually trying to communicate to them. Okay, remember the receptive understanding as well with things like hand gestures and facial expressions and eye contact. All that can be really, really frightening. So if they're trying to listen to your voice and use their auditory sense, they might find it really difficult if you're trying to get them to engage on a visual level as well. So that's something just to think about. Okay, please pop questions or comments in the box below as we go along. I can see we've got 8 people joined us, which is fantastic. Okay, so some of the things to try with your people around kind of that receptive difficulty. I suppose one of the first thing is about that attention. So it's about knowing what attention means for your person. Now that might not mean eye contact, because we know for a lot of people that's really difficult, and in some instances can physically be painful. So Temple Grandin, who is autistic, she tells us that when she was forced to look at people when she was little, it actually caused her physical pain. Okay, so we need to start off from a point of what does attention look for you like for your person, and work with that. Okay, so example, a toddler that I work with, he won't come up to me and look at me in the eye when I'm speaking to him, but he will stand and he'll do this out the corner of his eye. He'll still be looking at something else over there in the room, but I know that this looking out of the peripheral corner of his eye is actually him giving me a little bit of attention. Okay, so attention will mean different things for different people, and giving eye contact, not giving eye contact, it's okay basically. Okay. We then need to think about the language that we're using, so reducing a lot of this language and using minimal instructions. If we're trying to get our child or adult to do something, can we break that instruction down? So chunking together information. So rather than saying, right, put your shoes and socks on, we'll get in the car and go to school, we might start that off by saying socks on, and then waiting for that processing, and then shoes on, and then waiting, and then time for car. Now, I appreciate that is really difficult. You're all very busy families. You might have more than one child that you need to get out in the morning. You might have to get to work. You might have to feed the dog. All this other stuff happens. But we need to try and give our people that time to be able to process the instruction. Because otherwise, what might happen is the person gets quite stressed and quite anxious and doesn't follow any instruction at all. Okay? We need to maybe look at using first and then cards. So we use this a lot with our early years group, but there's nothing to stop you using it with adults. So it's a very simple concept of first we do breakfast, then we do car, and we're breaking it down into them two very simple concepts for our people. Okay, and that just helps them sequence things as well and makes things a bit more predictable. And because they tend to be quite visual, it reinforces the language element. Wherever we can bring in some visual reinforcement to our language, it can really help. So things like flashcards, using actual objects, so showing them the objects and actually telling them what it is and repeating it, and using a lot of repetition and rhyme can also be helpful. Okay. Naming objects in different contexts as well can be important. So some of our children and adults will struggle with generalisation. So, you know, every four-legged animal could be a dog. So it might be that we need to teach them the different names really for things. Not every four-legged animal is a dog. We might need to teach them that this is a cow, this is a horse, and this is a dog, okay? And we might need to teach them that in different contexts too, because they might struggle to kind of transfer that one name or that one label over to a different context or environment, okay? Visual aids wherever possible. We always recommend visual aids because they just back up that information. If you think about language, it's gone within seconds. I'm talking to you now, and yes, you can repeat this video if you really wanted to, but in essence, it's gone. By the second I've said it, it's out there and it's disappeared. If we back things up on a visual point of view, that information stays with that person, and that can help as well around memory difficulties.